Good, evil, is alignment dead?
Maybe not. Hey, welcome to Diarden. I'm Brad Wolf, and I'm here with Mike, and we are talking about myths in Dungeons and Dragons. So this is another one that gets people riled up.
Alignment is dead. I mean, I feel like eventually most people just go into chaotic. But
yeah, well, so this is a sentiment that alignment just doesn't even need to be a part of the game anymore. There's a whole group of people out there that are like, alignment's stupid. We should never use it. I'm again coming from playing since 1983 or whatever. I feel like alignment's a pretty valid part of the game.
Yeah.
I've been playing for 40 years now, and I've never had the kind of problems with alignment that a lot of people talk about online. So
yeah,
I don't understand why there's so much hate for alignment. And I don't think it's that big of a deal.
What are the main things that you remember people talking about online about alignment specifically that you just mentioned?
The biggest one is there's like this whole argument, like, is alignment, prescriptive or descriptive, right? Does, if you give your character alignment, should that then determine how you have to play this character?
Mm-hmm.
And is the DM responsible for holding you accountable to that, right? The classic example being, I'm playing a lawful good paladin, and the DM's constantly saying, "You're lawful good. You shouldn't be able to do that," right? That's kind of the classic example.
Yeah.
Right. Or like you have two players in the same party, one who's lawful good and one who's chaotic neutral, and then it becomes, well, my player wouldn't travel, or my character wouldn't travel with that character, right? My lawful good paladin wouldn't hang out with that chaotic neutral rogue. We can't be in the same party, right? So those are kind of the stereotypical arguments of that alignment's problematic. And then you get into the argument that there's only 9 alignments, and there's far more than 9 different types of people.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So so one thing is, one of the arguments against alignment is that it's not a mechanic, right? There's very little mechanical value to it. So why do we even use it? The mechanics of alignment got removed long ago, back when, like, largely in second edition, when you used to be able to like paladins were able to know alignment. Like, that was one of their class abilities.
Mm-hmm.
So the paladin could just, kind of eyeball somebody and use their holy power.
Good, evil.
yeah, exactly. And then the only other like significant mechanic was, again, like with paladins, if they did something truly evil, they could actually lose a level, right? Or there would be complications,
or become an oath breaker or whatever.
Right. So that was the inspiration for the Oathbreaker in 5th edition, is that, if instead of taking away a character's levels because their character has gone evil, just change their subclass, right? Mm-hmm. Just change them over to the Oathbreaker. So they still have all the same power, but it has a different flavor because they're now evil, right?
Gotcha.
So
yeah.
that was a pretty good solution. And now Oathbreaker is just a common, option, because it's all on D&D Beyond now. It's no longer locked behind the DM's guide.
Mm-hmm. So you might have already just touched on this, and I just spaced out for a second. So was there specific mechanics that you could like roll or invoke that were based around if you were good or neutral or evil, or was it just the paladin aspect of things?
It was mostly the paladin aspect.
Okay.
And some of that would kind of bleed over to the cleric, right? There were certain cleric mechanics that kind of continued into 3rd edition, that those were more based on the god that you served, not so much the alignment.
Yeah.
But the god you served had certain alignments spelled out for their worshipers.
Yeah.
Right. So so if I'm a power gamer and I want my cleric to have this specific ability, I want to serve this god, so I get these mechanics, and therefore because I serve this god, I have to choose one of these alignments, right?
Gotcha.
So that not directly mechanic, but kind of indirectly affected mechanics with clerics. But I think it's fine, and it doesn't. I don't think that the fact that it's not really that it doesn't really have any mechanical weight, I don't think that's a problem.
Yeah. I think it's definitely more, well, nowadays, in my eyes, it's definitely more of a character propellant. Specifically if you're like, I mean, neutral is kind of wishy-washy, right? That's why a lot of people I feel like are chaotic neutral, is so that they can just mesh with the group and not have any problems. Good is a decent one still. And lawful gets kind of fun in RP, especially if you have a chaotic character as well. But yeah, the only ones that I would say are hard, and why, if they become this alignment is hard to deal with, is straight up just the evil. Because then that creates the biggest tension between characters of, why do I continue with this person instead of just straight up kill them? The only time I've ever seen it work is not the maniacal, like, yes, we'll destroy them all. Yes. It's more like a conniving, like, mastermind who is just, honestly, just a sociopath or psychopath, where they have a mask on, they act the part, they, relate with the party, say what they want to hear. But down, below or behind the scenes, they're, doing things that are actually evil, or trying to do something aligning with their own goals. Specifically in one that I've had, where it was like the player, and it honestly, this made part of your number 3 point, a story driven game where they were straight up just a spy for the big bad evil guy, like, the entire time. And every evil thing that they were doing, they were a high charisma character. They were like the charisma character of our party. He would just like text our DM just so that, like, we were kind of newer, and a lot of people would still kind of metagame. So he was trying to make sure that like the metagame didn't happen. It was more of a explosive reveal at some part of the story,
Right.
which was beautifully done. That was the only time I feel like an evil character can actually work with an entire party, is that style. But yeah,
And it can be very creatively done. I've definitely
Yeah.
seen that sort of thing done really well.
Yeah.
And but for the other reasons you were talking about, like, I know when I DM'd Adventure League at my local game store, you weren't allowed to have chaotic evil characters.
Mm-hmm.
You
Just
could have a
killing everything.
lawful, yeah, you could have a lawful evil character. The idea being that they're more diabolical and kind of planning things out, where the chaotic evil character is like too much of a powder keg.
Yeah.
So they didn't allow chaotic evil in Adventure League.
Yeah.
But the other argument against it is that it just kind of doesn't make sense in our real world sensibilities, right?
Mm-hmm.
The argument against that is, well, this isn't a real world. This is a fantasy world where, angels literally interact with,
Right.
the populations, as do demons and devils, right? And those characters are clearly, aligned with powerful spiritual forces, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, your devils are lawful evil, and they come from the 9 hells, and your demons are, chaotic evil, and they come from the abyss, and angels are lawful good, and they come from Mount Celestia, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
And then there's all these actual gods that exist that characters can literally interact with, like your paladin, your cleric, even your warlock, right? Are regularly interacting with a supernatural force that's influencing the world, and and the alignment gives a certain amount of, like, a certain way to understand the abstractness of these, crazy beings that are outside the mortal realm.
Right.
And that's why in, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, they had alignment languages.
So they're
Because
actual mechanic then?
Yeah, so it was kind of a mechanic, right? Is that um, the different alignments all had their own language, and that was because alignments kind of were like a religion.
Hmm.
So if you carry that thought through, right, that a lawful good paladin is worshiping a particular god, and that's their religion, right? So lawful and good are two tenets of their faith.
Gotcha.
Right? So, and I think the original design of that, it was to kind of mirror the real world, where like Catholicism taught people Latin and Judaism taught people Hebrew. Um, like the religions of the day still um, kept these old languages alive,
Yeah.
right? So that's where I think they got the idea of alignment languages. So there would be a language attached to like these religious groups, these groups of people who identified with a certain spiritual path because they were connected to a certain deity, right?
Yeah.
Um, so the so if you apply that in the sense of, okay, well, if alignment is like a religion, how many people identify with a religion but don't practice it every day of their life,
Hmm.
right? So I think that's an easy way to explain why somebody overall would consider themselves neutral good, but not everything they do is balanced and good,
Right. I mean,
right?
and there's, I mean, people, there's all different types of people that hang out with other types of people. I mean, I hang out with people that are, very different spiritual or religious views than me. And it doesn't really, I mean, as long as they're either at least chaotic or good, I'll hang out with them, right? But
Right.
if someone's evil, that's the only time that it actually becomes an issue, like I was talking about before. But yeah, it's the I think that it's also gotten to a point where, because things are, well, a lot of games that I've played have had a more of a story driven thing, um, where it, like I was saying before, it becomes a propellant or also like an RP factor, right? Like having the good paladin, good lawful paladin being in group with the chaotic neutral rogue, and having these situations where there is something tying their group together and pushing them forward, and then having these like funny altercations or weird situations where it's like, yeah, we can just, yeah, we're hungry, let's just take some food, we don't have the money for it, and the paladin's like, but that's stealing, we can't, it can lead to some fun mechanics in game because of those alignment choices.
Right.
Is something I was, thinking about. And but also, and I don't know if this is somewhere that would be on your list, but I feel like also with how the games are played nowadays, there's also so much adapting and also gray area. Not everything's black and white anymore. That's why so many people choose chaotic neutral, is because there are some times where it's like there's a good choice, there's a bad choice, but you kind of have to ebb and flow between a lot of different things. Or hell, you can even talk about perspective. Maybe the good lawful paladin thinks they're a good lawful paladin, but really, in the eyes of a different country, a different kingdom, they are evil, right? Whatever they're
Right.
doing is evil.
Right.
And maybe neither one is doing something like killing babies, but they're, fighting against each other in a certain way that they think is just for their deity. I mean, not to get too deep into like real, real world things, but like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I think I've actually done this before. I was trying to think of a specific example, but I think you could totally have two lawful good factions in your world who are at war with each other,
Yeah.
you know? So you could definitely set that up.
Yeah.
And so both of them are doing what they think is lawful by their kingdom's laws, and they're both doing what's good for their kingdom,
Hmm.
right? Um, but they are still at odds with the other lawful good kingdom.
Yeah.
Like I think that's entirely possible. Um, and I don't think it's that complicated of a thought experiment to be able to spell that out.
Right.
So again, coming back to that idea that there's only 9 types, I don't really agree that everybody who's lawful good is going to think the exact same way, and everybody who's
Exactly.
chaotic neutral is going to think the exact same way.
With
Um,
how fluid it is in between those types, it's like there's a lot of possibilities. Way more than 9 for sure.
yeah. Well, and um, so then that becomes both, defense and criticism. So is alignment then just a shortcut? Is it just is it a shorthand for us to explain these different views,
Hmm.
right? And so that's a good defense, is that, well, alignment just works as a shortcut, right? And then the criticism to that argument is, well, yeah, but shortcuts aren't going to be nuanced, right? So then the discussion can become, well, do all shortcuts result in reductivism? Like, just because you have a shortcut for something, does that reduce an idea to a less, nuanced idea? Or is it just a shortcut?
I mean, I see it as just like a base, right? Something to grow off of.
Right.
And then as the campaign goes, I mean, again, going back into like nowadays things being kind of story driven and character developing is like I would say that, I mean, people grow and change all the time in real life. Why can't a character in a campaign, right? Like, why
Right.
can't
Yeah.
the chaotic neutral person slowly change over time and see, good values and then stop wanting to steal? Or the paladin realizes that, they were sheltered their whole life and didn't realize all these things were going on. So slowly become this from good lawful to more of a neutral stance and be like, well, some things have to happen in order for the greater good to win, type of thing.
Right. Yeah,
So there
exactly.
are these, it's more of like a wheel, I feel like, as it's kind of like a little dots kind of going in between slightly all the points and going back and forth. Um, like
Yeah,
the little color
more
hue thing, the colored wheel.
right, yeah. Which it's funny you describe it that way, because if you look at the planes of D&D, like the otherworldly planes, um, in some of the older diagrams, in fact, even the modern diagrams, they are laid out in a circle around the material plane. The material plane's in the middle, the
Mhm.
elemental planes are around that, and then the outer planes are in a big circle around all of those. And they actually go by alignment. Like
Okay.
Mount Celestia, like if you're looking at it like a clock, Mount Celestia is at noon at 12,
Yeah.
right? So Mount Celestia is the lawful good. That's where most of the angels live, right? And it goes around the circle until you get to and those are considered the upper planes. All the upper planes on the circle are the
Mhm.
good planes. They go from like chaotic good through lawful good down to neutral good, right? And then your lower planes go from neutral evil around to lawful evil up to chaotic evil, right? So
Yeah.
it completes the circle.
Yeah.
So when you look at it from a planar perspective, like these supernatural dimensions where the gods and powers that be all live, it very much looks like that circle of colors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
So
that, I mean, depending on how deep you want your game to be, instead of just like, I mean, alignments can be very much alive of just like, now this is what it is. Like, evil is evil, demons and devils, whatever. It's, and make it basic. But yeah, I feel like with a lot of like how games progress and how characters develop, um, things can be driven by a lot by perspective and what happens. Cause like, even in, and this is a random thought I had about a show that I watched through Supernatural, popular show.
yeah.
But there's a point in the storyline where it's like, the angels that were like on their side or whatever that was helping them, they realized like, oh, they're like looking down on humanity and want to just like kill everything that isn't, celestial. And basically, they got so good that it became like they were bad. So it's like this weird, like they think they're still doing something grand for the greater, the upper class of entities. And but then they're just not thinking about anything below them. Therefore, it's becoming evil in the shifted perspective of humans Or
Right.
I'm paraphrasing and not remembering a whole lot of stuff, but basically angels eventually became like the bad guys, right?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I think that things can change depending on, how the campaign goes and its perspective. And yeah, I think it's more of a color wheel than the exact subtypes.
Right. The exact 9 squares that we see in the memes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, so that would be an example where like the angels are so lawful that they lose track of good,
Yeah.
right?
I guess that's
Uh,
you summed it up perfectly. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah. Yeah.
so, well, that's why there's 2 of us to help each other explain stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and so the other criticism is like, well, why in the monster manual do all the monsters have an alignment if, 'cause are all orcs, chaotic evil,
Mhm.
right? Or all of this race lawful good, right? And of course, again, that's where I think the shortcut argument comes back is like, no, it's just a general way to explain the society that these creatures come from or the plane of existence that these creatures come from kind of predispose them to this type of alignment. And again,
Mhm.
it's a shortcut, right? To be able to say, most groups of these creatures are going to lean towards these 2 parts of the alignment wheel.
Yeah.
Um, and a good example of that, where I think a shortcut is very effective, right, is goblinoids, right? So you've got hobgoblins are lawful evil, goblins are neutral evil, and bugbears are chaotic evil.
Okay.
And the 3 are all related. They're all goblinoids, and they have a society of these 3 kind of subspecies, right?
Mhm.
So when you tell me that these 3 types of creatures all live in a community together, but they all kind of have their own version of evil,
Right.
right? It, I think it's a pretty good shortcut because I can look at that and say, okay, so the hobgoblins being lawful are more of the organizational force in the community, right?
Mhm.
Which, if you read the lore, they're the more militant. They're the soldiers of the culture, right? So that makes sense.
Mhm.
And then goblins are kind of neutral evil because they're kind of the catch-all. They kind of do a little bit of everything in the society.
Right.
And then the bugbears tend to be a little on the lazy side, and they also are really sneaky, so they make good assassins. So that kind of fits the chaotic evil part
Yeah.
of the society, right? So, so I think it's a pretty good shorthand to, to be able to identify kind of at a glance, okay, these 3 groups live together, even though they all have slightly different alignments.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, it's definitely more interesting to read it in paragraph form in like Volo's guide, where they explain all the dynamics of the different goblinoids, right? But I feel like the alignment is like was it TLDR,
Mhm.
right?
I mean, it makes it easier. You're not going to want to read every little nook and cranny of everything. I mean, at a glance, you're just looking for a basic layout, right? So I
Yeah,
think it makes sense.
yeah. So I think it's useful. It's
Yeah.
far more useful than people make it out to be, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Um,
And so but also with, goblins and stuff like that and all that. I mean, if they created another one that was like in the book, there's basic goblins. Let's say they're, chaotic or sorry, neutral evil, what you were saying. And then like the other ones, maybe they make another creature that is like goblin shopkeep or something like that, where it's just like neutral or whatever.
yeah,
And it's just
pure
like,
neutral.
yeah. And it's just a glance of like what it is. Cause I mean, on the flip side, if you look at, let's just take, for example, human. How do you classify a human's alignment in the monster manual, right? It's
Right,
based off of what they are. So like maybe a pirate is chaotic neutral. Maybe a priest is good, lawful, it's based
right,
off of what they are in the world, lesser than, just the thing that they are. So at a glance, it's just nice to be able to have that and know in the back of your mind, like where in the world they kind of fit.
right.
Um,
And yeah, so I think it's a useful shortcut. I think I don't find the shortcut to be a criticism. I think it's it's an app description. It's a shortcut. It makes sense.
Shortcut to base it and then grow it from there and decide where you want it to land. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the biggest problem with alignment, right, is that it's just been poorly explained. And in fact, the best explanation I've seen for alignment is in the 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide. And I think it's like chapter 4 where they're talking about NPCs, right? And they're drawing a connection between the player characters because 5th edition has the personality, bond, ideal, and flaw, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you make your character. So they're using that template for NPC design. So this is in the Dungeon Master's Guide to help the Dungeon Master create NPCs. But I think it would have been great to put a version of this in the Player's Handbook to help teach people how to use alignment in the game.
Absolutely.
So what they do, and so I created this little table, but this information is straight out of that chapter. I think it's, like I said, chapter 4 of the Dungeon Master's Guide.
Mm-hmm.
And so they give 6 different ideals for each alignment, right? So under the good column, you've got beauty, charity, greater good, life, respect, self-sacrifice, right? Under the neutral column, you've got balance, knowledge, live and let live, moderation, neutrality, and people, right? Your value is people in general. Mm-hmm. That's why you're neutral, right? So they give so they give 6 different ideals for each alignment. So what I've done in the past is when especially when I have a bunch of new players, is I tell them, if you're going to pick an alignment and you're picking your 4 background traits, the personality, ideal, bond, and flaw, make one of those line up with one of the aspects of your alignment. So make your ideal line up with good if you're going to be neutral good. Make your flaw or your bond line up with neutral, right? And so that kind of fine tunes what type of good are you, what type of neutral are you, right? And you kind of have, so now this gives you, instead of 9 different types of alignments, I mean, I don't even know how to do the math.
Yeah.
Because now you've got 6 different ideals under each of the 5 alignments.
Right.
And you can mix and match accordingly. So I actually found this really useful and was kind of, when I found it, I was like, oh, this is really cool. Why the heck is it buried in the DM's Guide NPC section? This has been around for almost 10 years. It's been in the 5th edition DM's Guide. But I bet most players have never seen this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's really useful coming back to that nuance of role play, right? So if I'm playing that lawful good paladin, right, and my lawful idea is tradition, right? So kind of samurai-esque. There's like these traditions that I follow to be lawful.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm also good, and so I believe that self-sacrifice is kind of my version of good, right? I believe that I uphold the law and I sacrifice myself to put myself in these dangerous situations, right, to protect the innocent, right? So now I've kind of established what my lawful idea is and what my good idea is. So when I role play, I can role play that conflict.
Yeah.
When there's a situation where my tradition comes up against my ideal of self-sacrifice.
Yeah.
Right. So that allows for actually a lot of nuance. If you just picked 2 things off of this chart, right?
I'm just trying to make combos right now. I'm just like, oh yeah, lawful evil, fairness in slaughter. Like, okay, I'm gonna kill everyone equally. Sorry.
Well, that's Thanos, right?
Yeah. True. Right? Actually, wow. Okay. Yeah.
So there, in Thanos's rationale, there was fairness to the slaughter of half of the galaxy.
Mm-hmm. I
right?
always wondered if he snapped his finger, was he okay with the chance that maybe he was the half too?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. All right. Conviction.
Yeah, or maybe like there's a split second in the middle of his finger snap where he's like, but not me.
Yeah. I wanna go on a farm and do some stuff. Yeah, this is a good board for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, if you're using this to come up with evil characters, there's some kind of insidious combinations. Like, what about logic and pain?
Yeah, I was looking at that too. I was like, that's creepy.
Right. Like
Yeah.
that's your psychopath right there.
Like,
Right.
oh, we're not hurting to just hurt. We're gonna hurt to get the information, but we need to do it properly. We're not gonna just start, slicing and dicing. I have bamboo sticks that I'm gonna put under their fingernails. That's very, very appropriate for this. What we're trying to do, like, get weird. Like, I don't allow torture in my games, but like, I could see like, a character being fucking wild in that regard. Um,
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
And depending on how grim dark, right, you're gonna go. Like I could see a villain in the campaign, right, where like logic and pain, right?
yeah,
They have a very specific methodology about how they want the world, and they believe that inflicting pain and inflicting difficulty, right, inspires um you know, development, like the evolutionary idea of um, the survival of the fittest.
hmm
So as I'm explaining that, I'm like, hey, that's Apocalypse from the X-Men, right?
yeah,
I'm going to make the world as terrible as possible so that only the most powerful mutants survive, right? So that would be kind of a logic and pain combination.
yeah. Yeah, there's a bunch of like combinations now that I'm just like looking back and forth between. I'm like, oh, they could do that, 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 that. I'm even looking at like good and chaotic of just thinking about like you could straight up just have like I mean independence and life. Like you're just trying to free every city you come across. You're a liberator. I don't know. Like
Yeah, I played that character before.
yeah.
I made I think it was a sorcerer. Um, that was those were kind of my tenets, right? It was like life and freedom,
Yeah.
and and we came across this village, and it turned out that the uh, the people that we needed to rent a boat from in order to set up the whole adventure were like these really bad people that were kind of holding the whole town hostage.
Mhm.
And the DM was just trying to set the tone. Like, this is going to be a dark fantasy campaign. And that was all he was trying to do, was set the tone with this village who was kind of oppressed by these like river pirates. And my character wasn't having it. Like, my character's like, we've got to free these people. Like, because I'm role playing these character traits of being chaotic good. Like, oppression is bad. And that's where I had to metagame and be like, okay, this is clearly not the problem the DM was presenting.
Mhm.
Like, his problem was, how do we get a boat away from these pirates? So what I did, because I was a sorcerer, I twin cast some sort of buff spell on two of the villagers and gave both of them weapons. I'm like, here's a staff, here's a dagger. I twin cast whatever buff spell I had,
Mhm.
and said, take a couple friends, get out of town, and get help. So that was my character solution. Like, I'm gonna help. I'm basically created a little adventuring party. I'm gonna take 4 of you,
Mhm.
give 2 of you weapons, and did 2 of you a buff spell, and send you on your way to go on an adventure to come back and rescue your village.
I like it. That's awesome.
So that was how I reconciled my character's chaotic good alignment in that situation, but still played the game that the DM had for us. Was like, well, you got to get a boat away from these river pirates so you can get upriver, and go on the adventure.
Yeah. I'm still looking through these combinations of like also I was trying to justify like my color wheel and my like kind of gray areas, and I'm looking at these things, and I've already found some that kind of have that feeling. Like if you take even on opposing kind of sides or whatever, you take good and chaotic, you could do greater good and no limits. That could be viewed as evil very quickly. Like what you think is for the greater good and not stopping at any cost, no limits, holding you back, could get dark. Or on the flip side, on the lawful and evil, it could be retribution and honor. Like maybe you were a paladin whose whole city got destroyed by some, just warring faction, and now you're just like, all right, I'm gonna kill them all. Whatever. It's for honor. Or even like retribution and freedom or independence from chaotic as well, or something like that. I don't know. Retribution and whimsy. That could be funny. I don't know about that. Or like, greed and whimsy could be a kind of a gray, kind of evil, chaotic one too. So yeah, this is a great layout. I like this a lot. And
retribution and whimsy, right? That could be like a fae.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're playing a fae character who is seeking retribution against the human kingdom because they've destroyed your forests.
Yeah.
Right? But you're still fae, so you're still whimsical. So you do really weird stuff to torture people, with your fae magic to make their lives miserable as retribution for what they've done to your fae forest.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds like a hag, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I like it.
I think that would make a really good like fae warlock. What is it? The Oath of the Ancients or whatever warlock?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
It's Oath of the Ancients paladin. What's the fae warlock?
I know what you're talking about. One of my friends is playing one right now, actually. Oh, just the Archfey. Yeah. So, yeah. Well, cool.
So I think this actually was a great way to address alignment. I just hate that it was buried in the DM's guide and not put in the player's handbook. I think this should have been in the player's handbook
for sure.
And maybe we would have saved ourselves 10 years of arguing about alignment.
At like the beginning of character creation. That would really help. Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of the one paragraph or whatever it is we get about alignment, and it's definitely like less than a page.
Yeah.
But like you could just put this table in the player's handbook, and this would, just looking at this table, explains a heck of a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't think alignment's dead. I think alignment can be a very useful tool if you want to use it. If you don't want to use it, throw it out. It's okay.
Yeah.
But again, don't crap on somebody else's fun.
And it just wasn't properly explained, so people kind of made assumptions. Yeah. So got lost in the sauce.
So once again, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, throw your comments down below. Let us know how wrong we are, how right we are, or how crazy we are.
And what you want us to talk about next. Thanks again for watching. Later.